your mom. Just here one more time for chapter 2 of the Grandma Story. This is my third time trying it, so hopefully this time it's gonna work. And Grandma Story, also known as When Grandma Was a Little Girl, we're going to hear about the journey to Laidlaw. So, let's get started. Now, I will tell you about our trip to the little town of Laidlaw, Oregon. It is now called Tumalo. I'm going to refer to our parents as Papa and Mama now because that's what we called them in our younger years. As we grew older, it was Dad and Mother. But Papa and Mama fits in with this story of our young life. I was 5 years old when we left for Laidlaw, Oregon. There were 8 of us. Brother George was there already, and the eldest of us was going on that trip was Brother Irwin. Then we had Brother John, Brother Malin, Brother Melvin, Sister Emily, and I was the youngest. We came in 2 covered wagons to the town of Laidlaw, which is now called Tumalo. After spending the first winter in town, we went out to our home out on the farm. Papa had a nice house built there, and a Mr. Hall had been the carpenter. There was a fireplace in the living room, and we always enjoyed a fire in it when the weather was cold. The wind blew down mightily from the house, from the snowy peaks of the high Cascades, and in the winter it would shake the house like it was going to tear us to pieces, but the house always stood. Many a night, especially in the winter, we heard the howl of the lonely coyote. We were warm and we were well fed. We were secure and happy in the love of Mama and Papa and all of our aunts and uncles and cousins who lived nearby. I believe we had 19 cousins nearby. It was in 1907, probably in August, but I'm not sure about that. Before school started, though, that Papa and Mama and 6 children took the 2 covered wagons, teams, a riding horse, and last but not least, Brother John's bicycle to Laidlaw. Now, I don't know if John rode that bicycle all the way or not, but he rode it a good part of the way, so my older brothers told me. The trip took 21 days, and if you've ever traveled on a wagon or a buggy over rough roads, you know that's a long way. Dear Mama had to cook for all of us on a little camp stove, which was probably 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. That little stove had an oven in it, and I can remember my mother making the most perfectly delicious biscuits in it. Mama, being thrifty, never spared any effort in creating the best meals with what was at hand. And boy, I guess with that kind of travel and that kind of cold and weather, you probably had a good appetite too. Made those biscuits taste awfully good. So, the days went on, and I remember we stopped at one little place to buy milk from the ranch house. Sister Emily and the rest of us went to buy the milk, and we were greeted by a dog. Now, this dog didn't bark at us. He just kind of looked us over, and he slunk down, and he crept around us. Well, I guess he knew better than to attack any of the older children, but he thought he was equal to taking care of me. So he grabbed me by the heel, and like to have scared me to death. I would know that dog anywhere if I saw him again today. That dog was a black shepherd with little brown spots on his eyes. Of course, I screamed to high heaven, and to this day I'm still afraid of strange dogs. I don't remember if we got the milk or not, but at any rate, that was a frightening experience. As we went on our journey, I also remember we came to Fishhook Ferry, which was over the Snake River. The roads were narrow and graveled, and they weren't wide enough to pass anyone except for the turnarounds. As we got down to the bottom of the gorge, the family met a young man and his mother who lived near the river. The young man ran the ferry, which wasn't propelled by any motor or anything of that type. It was an old-time ferry that was pulled over by cables and by the current in the river. So by and by we ferried across. Clear from the bottom of this gorge, we looked up on the other side and saw a little shack. In the yard there was a little creature who looked too large for a dog. Someone asked the young man what that was, and he said it was an Indian woman who had been left to die by her people. She couldn't take care of herself any longer or be of any use to her tribe, so they left her there to starve to death. But the young man said, "My mother and I see that she has food and is taken care of." She was so crippled with arthritis, which was called rheumatism then, that she had to get down on all fours, and she was out in the yard picking up some chips or something. I will never forget Fishhook Ferry. Another editorial. I'm pausing here because if you've ever gone down that gorge to the Snake River and you talk about a narrow road and a gorge, this is a deep gorge. This must have been quite the adventure. Well, we went on our way and we got over into eastern Oregon. The wind came down icy cold off the snowy peaks of the Three Sisters. We traveled long and hard, and it was very tiring, so we stopped and made camp. We had to make as many miles a day as we could, and I mentioned before, it took us 21 days on that trip, and that's a lot of jolts to your wagon. Well, this one particular night when we stopped to make camp, Papa built a fire, and I suppose Mama was going about preparing supper when Melvin started to cry because he was cold. Melvin at that time was about 9 years old, so Papa took his overcoat and wrapped Melvin in it. I actually thought it was a buffalo hide coat, but my folks tell me it was actually a cowhide coat. Well, anyway, he wrapped Brother Melvin in this coat besides the fire, and I guess Melvin hushed his crying, and then Papa went about his business of fixing up the camp, and he turned around and he accidentally stepped on Melvin, and Melvin cried to high heaven, saying, "First you starve me to death, then you freeze me to death, and then you step right square on my head." Of course, it was kind of funny to us other kids, but it was really pitiful. Poor little Melvin. It was a tough old life, believe me. But we were fed pretty soon, and we lived through the rigors of traveling. The excitement mounted as we approached Laidlaw. Brother John was so excited that as we were nearing our destination, he got on his bicycle and he went far ahead. The roads, as I mentioned before, were rough and very gravelly. Well, this one time on the journey, we were going up a steep grade when one of our horses, named Liz, balked. Now, riding horses don't balk, but driving horses will if they get more load than they can bear or stand. They will just stop and quit trying. Well, old Liz balked and nothing could persuade her to go on. I guess the load was too heavy for her, so the load had to be lightened. The one thing that would make a difference of lightening the load was Mama's bureau, which Grandpa Everett had made especially for her as a wedding gift. Well, the bureau was dumped out on the ground, and one of the drawers broke, but we finally made it up the hill. I recall the only thing that the wagons held were the camping equipment, some clothes and bedding, and one piece of furniture. That was Mama's bureau, which was reloaded when we got to the top of the hill. Well, the family went on and finally arrived at Laidlaw, which was, at one time, a small lake, looking just like the bottom of a big cup. It used to also be an Indian campground. As time went on, Papa found a vacant house, which was owned by a man named Mr. Mudd. Well, the house wasn't very far from the Deschutes River, which if any of you have been in that part of the country, you will know that the river is very cold and rapid flowing. In French, des means from, and chutes means waterfalls or rapids, which it amply describes. The drinking water had to be carried in because we were quite away from the river, but at any rate, in no time at all, we were comfortably housed in this new home, and oh, what a happy time it was. School hadn't started yet, and the children were out every day, and they walked all over the countryside. In our exploring, we found what seemed to be 3 Indian graves. The graves didn't have any markers on them, but we were taught by our parents that it would be wrong to disturb the dead, so we didn't touch them in any way. I still know where those graves are. They are under the present highway that nears the bridge across the Deschutes by Tumalo Park. Also in our exploring, we found a pile of really white bleached bones that seemed to me to be the size of a small house. Of course, I was just a little girl then, and I don't know really how big they were. But as the story goes, many years before, there was a man by the name of Marsh Aubrey who lived in that area. His pride and joy were his horses. In those days, if you had horses, you had real wealth. Well, the winter came on and it began to snow, and it snowed so much that getting outside was almost impossible. Well, Mr. Aubrey ran out of food for the horses, and, as the story was told, the only one of his horses that survived the winter was a little mare. He took her into the house and he fed her oatmeal to keep her alive. But when winter was over, all you could see outside was a pile of bleached bones, the remains of the other horses. This is a very tragic story. Well, the days were long and beautiful before the snow. The weather was rather warm and pleasant, but of course, the nights are still cold. Still, we were roaming around the countryside. We found arrowheads in all sizes and spearheads lost through the years. These artifacts included tiny arrowheads which the Indians used for hunting birds, medium-sized arrowheads, and spearheads that were used for killing deer and antelope. At last it came time to start school, but I was too little to go that year, but Melvin, Malin, John, and Emily did. One of the first teachers we had was Miss Nellie James. Miss James later became our beloved sister-in-law when she married Brother George. There will be more history about George and what he did to develop the country later. Well, sometime in the fall I had an experience which I can never forget. Water held a great attraction for us, and the rushing to chutes with this icy cold water was close by. My brothers and sister were not afraid of the water. They could all swim, but me, and we had spent the previous summer at Medical Lake just outside of Spokane. 6 of us swam and played in the water there every day. Well, someone had fixed a little walk out over the Deschutes River to get out where it was deep enough to get nice, good cold water to drink that wasn't mucky. So, of course, children being adventuresome, we went out on it. And I tagged along with the older ones everywhere, so I went along. I can remember looking down at the water and I got dizzy. I thought, oh my, and I couldn't stand up because I got so dizzy. So pretty soon I fell right off and into the icy cold water. I'll never forget it. I went down and the water washed me and tumbled me. The green weed that grows near the riverbank of the Deschutes, we called it fishweed, and it covered my head and my face in the most horrifying manner. But Brother Malin, who was only 11 years old, jumped in after his baby sister and hauled me to the bank. He never hesitated 1 minute. It was a frightful, horrifying experience. In the meantime, Papa had gone to Bend on business. He came home and Mama had his noon meal all ready for him. We had already had ours and had gone out to play. And Papa said, "Where are the children?" And Mama answered, "Oh, they're out playing." And he said, "Did they go down to that river?" And she said, "Well, I don't know." And he left his lunch and he got inside of us just in time to see me fall. Well, Papa was a short and chubby man, and he ran as hard as he could to get there. But before he got there, Brother Malin had pulled me out of the water. The excitement was pretty well over, but Papa just simply lay down on the ground because he was out of breath and overcome with shock. He gave Malin a good scolding and said, "Why did you let her fall off into that water for?" Well, that was too bad, because Brother Malin deserved a lot of praise instead of being scolded. Of course, Papa was real upset, and the baby was always supposed to be taken care of, and that undoubtedly wasn't an easy job. Well, little children will do things that they shouldn't, and they never thought about me falling in the water, of course. Let me tell you a little more about the house that Papa had built for us. It was 3 bedrooms all upstairs, and a kitchen and living room downstairs. And Papa loved that fireplace, so we made sure to have a fireplace. Now, the fireplace was well built. It was built of a kind of pink lavender rock. See, the cliffs down by Tumalo Park at that time were kind of pink lavender. That fireplace was built in 1907, and it showed the pink color for many years, and then it turned to just plain dark gray rock. The rocks in the fireplace at the time the fireplace was built, they could be sawed or cut with an axe. I don't remember the name of the man who built the fireplace, though. The fireplace drew well, but as any of you who have ever sat around an old-time fireplace know, you cook on one side and you freeze on the other. But we had our own fireplace. We had a real kitchen with a real stove in it. Later on, Papa built a new kitchen, and the original kitchen was turned into a bedroom. I want you to know that Papa and Mama were God-fearing people. They were good Christian folks, and we were taught by example a great deal. The first thing I learned to read was a label on a beautiful doll I got for our first Christmas in Laidlaw. Underneath the clothes was a "Made in Germany." And that was the first thing I learned to read. The next thing I learned to read was on the wall of our kitchen, put up in bold black letters, and that was the 10 Commandments. There was also another scripture that tells about having God's laws always with you. We learned a great deal about Christianity at mealtime at that table. If someone had killed someone else, we were taught that it was wrong to kill, because it said so in the 10 Commandments. If someone was a liar and you couldn't take his word, we were taught that it was wrong to lie. I never attended Sunday school much as a little child because of the distance to church and because of the bad weather. But Papa and Mama were always behind any church effort. My first Sunday school teacher was Miss Nellie James, who later married my brother George. And then in the book is a picture of Laidlaw. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed chapter 2, and next time we'll read a little bit about farm life in Laidlaw.